The death of an American aid worker in ISIS custody is confirmed. President Obama readies his pitch to Congress for the use of force. And the White House and State Department vigorously spin to correct something the president said in an interview. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. Welcome to Washington. President Obama says American aid worker Kayla Jean Mueller epitomized all that is good in our world. And he's vowing to bring her ISIS captors to justice. We received confirmation today that Mueller has died, although we do not know the circumstances. It comes as the president gets ready to involve Congress in the fight against the self-declared Islamic State. We have Fox team coverage. Jennifer Griffin's at the Pentagon with renewed contributions to the coalition by the United Arab Emirates. Catherine Herridge is at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base with her sources and what they're saying about Mueller's death. But we begin with Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry and one more big reason tonight for the president to go after ISIS. Good evening, Ed.
That's right. Good evening, Brett. The president just did an interview with BuzzFeed in which he said that not paying ransom for American hostages is about as tough as anything he does as commander-in-chief. He also confirmed that he tried and failed to rescue Kayla Mueller and other hostages last summer, contending that he tried everything he could to try and save her. Despite the grim revelation that Kayla Mueller became the fourth American hostage killed by ISIS since last summer, her family tried to focus on the positive, releasing a final letter in which Mueller movingly wrote she leaned on God in the most desperate hours and had, quote, a lot of fight left inside of me.
The world wants to be more like Kayla. And if that is her legacy and the footprint that she leaves on the world, then that is a wonderful thing.
Yet at the White House, spokesman Josh Earnest today strongly defended President Obama's comments to Vox.com, suggesting the media has overhyped the ISIS threat. The spokesman doubling down on the president's claim that climate change is a bigger threat to Americans than terror.
The point that the president is making is that there are many more people on an annual basis who have to confront the impact, the direct impact on their lives of climate change or on the spread of a disease than on terrorism.
Earnest also defended the president's claim that zealots randomly shot folks at a deli in Paris last month, when in fact it was a kosher market where Jews were targeted. The press secretary claiming at one point this was a dispute over where the adverb randomly was placed in the president's sentence.
These individuals were not targeted by name. This is the point.
The point actually was that the people were targeted because of their religion, though Jen Psaki at the State Department inaccurately suggested not all of the victims at the market were Jewish, when in fact all four were.
Well, as you know, I believe if I remember the victims specifically, there were not all victims of one background or one nationality. So
pressed on whether it was an anti-Jewish attack, Psaki would not comment, even though back on January 11th, the Jerusalem Post quoted U.S. officials as saying they joined France in declaring the attack had targeted Jews. Another State Department official declaring at the time, quote, we condemn in the strongest terms yesterday's cowardly anti-Semitic assault against the innocent people in the kosher supermarket. The president said the opposite in the Vox.com interview.
He said, I'm sort of like a big city mayor. Is that the president trying to downplay the threat?
And the president devotes significant periods of his day on a regular basis to confronting the threat that is posed by ISIL, by al-Qaeda affiliates, and by other organizations around the globe that seek to do harm to the American people.
Despite those efforts, ISIS has now spread to Afghanistan, even though U.S. General John Campbell told CBS's 60 Minutes last month that Afghan security forces would not let that happen. Yet U.S. officials confirmed today a Taliban commander who was released from Gitmo had become a recruiter for ISIS in Afghanistan before being killed Monday by an American drone strike. Another reason Republicans today said they'll dig into the details of the president's new authorization for the use of military force against ISIS.
For the past 6 years, the administration's consistent dithering has made the world less, not more safe. And it is high time that the president and his team articulate a clear and coherent strategy.
Meanwhile, today the administration closed its embassy in Yemen just months after the president claimed that country was an example of his counter-terror policies working and being a success. While tonight, Josh Earnest is clarifying on Twitter that, yes, the attack in Paris was motivated by anti-Semitism, and the president did not mean to suggest otherwise. Brett?
More on this with the panel. Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thanks. Well, as Ed just mentioned, President Obama tells BuzzFeed in an interview that just posted moments ago that there was an attempt to rescue Kayla Mueller last year.
We devoted enormous resources and always devote enormous resources to freeing captives or hostages anywhere in the world. And I deployed an entire operation at significant risk to rescue not only her, but the other individuals that had been held, and probably missed them by a day or two, precisely because we had that commitment.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is on assignment in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Last fall, U.S. officials asked her to hold reporting on Mueller's captivity, citing ongoing efforts to secure her release, as well as national security concerns. Catherine joins us now. Catherine, what can you tell us tonight?
Well, Brett, our source was someone who had a direct knowledge of the efforts to secure the release of the Western hostages in Syria, and tonight we can report new details about Kayla Mueller's kidnapping. In August of 2013, she was traveling with a Syrian who she described to colleagues as her boyfriend at the time. They were traveling in a vehicle just across the border into Syria when their vehicle was forced off the road. This information suggesting to our contact specifically that Kayla Mueller was targeted because she was an American citizen. The Syrian was released by ISIS shortly thereafter, and there was some concern at the time that he may have been bait or a plant to try and lure Kayla into a trap. But he then went back to ISIS and tried to secure her release, but to no avail, and the suspicion surrounding him was discarded at that time. Our contact also confirmed to us that the Western hostages were often held in groups and moved only between 3 cities in Syria between September of 2013 and May of 2014, including Aleppo, an industrial area, as well as Raqqa, Syria, and that the hostages were in such close proximity at that time that Kayla was able to get a communication to the Western hostages, including James Foley, who was held in that group, that she was not being mistreated by her captors, Brett.
You know, Catherine, you just heard the president talk about that failed effort to get Mueller and another hostage there. It just came down to specific intelligence and operating fast enough on that intelligence.
The information we were able to obtain at the end of last year is that there was very strong, specific, and perishable intelligence by late May, just 6 to 7 weeks before the administration signed off on that rescue attempt. And this was very specific information about a location in Raqqa, including a building. And at that time, the Western hostages were being held together. And this is really seen by our contacts as the last best chance to rescue those Americans, Brett.
Catherine Herridge in a windy Guantanamo Bay. Catherine, thank you. Well, many believe the success or failure of the ISIS fight will come down to the participation of America's Arab partners. Tonight, word of progress on that point, while much confusion about another. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon.
A key Arab ally rejoined the air campaign against ISIS. The United Arab Emirates sent a squadron of F-16s to Jordan, and today those fighter jets returned from flying their first mission over Syria since December. The Pentagon and others, meanwhile, pushed back on the idea that the U.S. was coordinating the air war against ISIS with Syria's president.
Let me try to be real clear here. We are not communicating or coordinating our military operations with the Assad regime. We're not doing it directly, and we're not doing it indirectly.
We warned Syria not to engage U.S. aircraft. We did not request the regime's permission.
But in an interview with the BBC, Syrian President Bashar Assad said he receives information about the U.S.-led airstrikes, quote, that's through third party, more than one party, Iraq and other countries, which elicited an angry response from the White House.
What was made clear in that communication is that it's the responsibility of the Syrian government, to put it bluntly, stay out of the way.
Meanwhile, Jordan deployed troops on the border with Iraq, a show of force on top of the 56 airstrikes that Jordanian officials announced they carried out over 3 days as retribution for their pilot being burned alive, raising questions from some former Air Force commanders about the slow pace of the U.S.-led coalition strikes until now.
We have been flying since August 8th a glacial rate of sorties. We fly an average, it's less than 10, somewhere between 7 to 10 sorties a day.
The Jordanians received their target set from a 3-star U.S. general.
Well, let me explain how it works. Number one is that it all is coordinated. So regardless if Jordan is flying more sorties or not, there is a coordinated effort.
After 3 days of intensive airstrikes by Jordan, the coalition has returned to flying a handful of strikes a day. The U.S. has carried out 92% of the 1,000 airstrikes over Syria since August. Brett.
Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Up next, all is not well on planet Hillary. Infighting in what is expected to become the Clinton campaign. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 25 in Boston, where city and school officials are trying to figure out how to make up all the lost classroom time because of the record snowfall. The head of the teachers union tells the Boston Herald members would have to vote on whether they work holidays, vacations, or go beyond the normal end date of June 30th. A man linked to the abductions and deaths of 2 Virginia college students is now charged with murder. Jesse Matthew Jr. faces a first-degree murder charge in the case of 18-year-old Hannah Graham, who was found dead last fall. Matthew is said to be linked but not charged in the death of 20-year-old Morgan Harrington in 2009. And this is a live look at New York from our Fox affiliate there, Fox 5. The big story there tonight, a report of a criminal indictment against a rookie police officer who fired into a darkened stairwell at a Brooklyn public housing complex, accidentally killing a man who had been waiting for an elevator. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.